Wuthering Waves' 2.5 banners are looking stacked, so today I aim to help you decide who's worth your precious Astrites this time around. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. One quick note, this video is going to serve as a quick TLDR format to help you decide who you should be pulling for. There's going to be more in-depth pros and cons on each character coming up this patch, closer to their time. With that out of the way, let's go. First off, we've got Phrolova. She's going to be an absolute queen of Havoc. If you're looking for the potential strongest Havoc DPS, then you've come to the right place, because Phrolova is going to offer you that in spades. She's interesting because she has very unique gameplay to offer. She doesn't feature a traditional Resonance Liberation. Not at all. She summons Hecate, a summon that's able to fight for her. And she quite literally behaves like a conductor. The main reasons as to why you would want to pick her up is if you're a really big Cantarella fan, because she's now finally giving the Jellyfish Lady a genuinely good meta use case. Before, Cantarella wasn't necessarily terrible because she did have teams that she could work in, but there was no definitive best in slot for her. With Phrolova around, now she has one. So if you're somebody that pulled for Cantarella back when she released, then I would really suggest that you look into getting Phrolova, because she's going to be able to make excellent use out of her. Not only that, but she's also retroactively increasing the value of Roccia, now finally giving her a definitive best in slot team where she actually feels like a significant upgrade. Then making way for a very interesting triple Havoc team, which would consist of Phrolova, Cantarella, and Roccia, with Roccia buffing Cantarella, and then Cantarella going into Phrolova. So if you're fans of either of the previously underutilized Havoc supports, then I would really suggest that you get her. Because Kuro's finally breathed some new life into them, giving them both a new reason to be used. I would say that if you don't have either of those characters and you're not particularly interested in pulling them, it's not that you won't be able to make use out of her because you can use Donjin as a free-to-play friendly second slot teammate thanks to your outro skill, which is able to provide 23% Havoc damage bonus to the incoming Resonator. But with that being said, I would say that it might be better saving for a different DPS then, because although Phrolova is indeed highly potent, her supports are quite niche, and they're only really good for her specifically. If you invest into her, you have to be willing to commit to that line of investment, whereas say if you invest into Triple Fusion, there's 2 5-stars in that team that are extremely versatile across your entire account, and end up being very good in a multitude of teams. That's just to kind of help put into perspective how niche these investments really are. Because in comparison, Roccia only really has Camellia teams outside of Phrolova teams. And there is also Havoc Rover shenanigans as well if you're interested in that. Cantarella is in a better position, but once again, there's usually some other support that you're able to use in her place. I will say, her being a Rectifier DPS is in her favor because it means that she can use String Master, which is a very universal 5-star weapon. But outside of that, yeah, her premium team is quite high cost. I don't think it's going to be as bad as a negative status character, but I do imagine that the difference is still going to be quite noticeable. I do think it can get away with having no Roccia, but no Cantarella is likely to be rougher. This is mostly because we don't really have any of our second slot teammates that is on Cantarella's level of quality for Phrolova specifically, whereas with Roccia, you can probably just put Shorekeeper in her place, and that'll get the job done just fine. Either way, a very strong Havoc DPS. Not a requirement by any means, but definitely a strong character. I'm gonna put her into A tier for the value rankings of this patch. I do want to say, once again, definitely strong, but not needed by any means. Then we move on to Roccia. I've given this clown kid a really hard time over these past few months, because ever since her release, she just hasn't really been able to justify her price tag. Yes, she is Camellia's best in slot, but just not by any noticeable margin that would justify her price. Previously, a maximum of 160 limited pulls with worst case luck was seriously just not really worth it when you could just use Sonhua instead, and while she did indeed shine in Whimpering Wastes, that mode can be taken care of effectively in so many other ways so effectively to the point where pulling Roccia just feels redundant, especially as a Camellia support, because of how inherently strong the Crazy Lady is at that particular game mode. But now she's finally going to have an effective niche carved out within Phrolova teams. So if you have any interest in the Conductor, then I wouldn't actually completely brush over Roccia. She finally has a team where she genuinely feels like a good pull now. Now granted, I would like to say, she does still remain as being quite niche, and I wouldn't really get her unless you're looking to really hard invest into Phrolova. The reason I say this is because, like I said before, you're able to use other third slot teammates that are very effective in terms of buffing, meaning that you don't necessarily need Roccia. There are other characters that are able to fill her slot just fine and provide very effective team buffs. The best example is obviously Shorekeeper. Crit is very hard to top. And boy does she provide some very valuable crit. However, if you're willing to make that niche investment, then yeah, she is a genuinely good pull for Phrolova now. Now like I said, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it as a first pull, and I wouldn't really get her if you don't have Cantarella yet. I would prioritize getting Cantarella first. But I do genuinely think the Clown Kid actually has something going for her now. So I would say that if you're really big on Havoc, and you seriously want to invest in Phrolova, then she's going to be a good pickup for a premium best installed team. Now, I don't think that she's the key support. She is not really what's going to make or break your Phrolova feeling really good or bad. That would be Cantarella in my opinion. However, she is indeed a pretty solid pull now. I will say, before you all say that you were right that Roccia ended up being good, reminder that she's getting a rerun next to the character that she's being made relevant by. So if you skip through the first time around, you didn't make a bad decision, because now you can pull her when she's actually relevant. She'll go into B tier for the value rankings of this patch. I do consider her to be worth pulling for now. The Roccia hate session is over. However, once again, she's still quite niche, so I'd only get her if you're big on Phrolova. Yes, she is good for Camellia, but not enough so over Sanhua to the point where I would pull her just for the crazy lady. And now it's time for everybody's favorite jellyfish, Cantarella, another unit that's being boosted up by Phrolova. Not only is she likely to be good there, but she's also very strong for Jinchi teams, because she's able to provide both coordinated attacks and skill percent and outro. Carlotta also enjoys this outro skill. You can generally stick her as a second slot teammate in front of any DPS that likes skill percent, or you can even use her in Donjon Hyper teams, because she ends up being the absolute best buffer for Donjon. Now granted, most Donjon mains just prefer to run solo anyway, because you guys are all crazy. However, if you're a rare case of a more casual Donjon fan, then Cantarella's a pretty good pickup. However, we of course gotta discuss the absolute cream of the crop here. She's going to be amazing for Phrolova. They both have echo-based abilities in their kit and enjoy echoes being used in the team, and it's likely that she's going to be able to leverage her outro skill fully. If not the skill percent, then at least the Havoc percent. If you're somebody that's been wanting to get Cantarella but was just waiting for her to finally get a DPS where she is definitively the best for them, well then here you go. This is her big meta break. I would like to say that although she does have some generalist qualities, there are better generalists out there. So this is another case of a unit where, while they are good in my opinion, and I do think that they have definitely redeemed themselves thanks to the release of a new character, I wouldn't go out of your way to get them unless you're particularly interested in that new character. If you're a Phrolova fan, that's great. Cantarella will be eating well. If you're not, it's not as rough as Roccia, because I do think that Cantarella has other meaningful use cases. But it's likely that she's not going to feel fully utilized without the conductor. But either way, I do think Kuro Games has achieved making this character feel genuinely viable in the meta now. She's able to do some nifty personal damage, especially if you have her signature weapon, and she's a pretty comfortable character because she's able to heal your whole team. All around, we'll stick this jellyfish lady into A tier. She has decent use cases elsewhere, while now having a definitive best in slot with a high potential DPS. An overall good investment these days. Then we move on to Brant Wuthering Waves. It feels like this guy has had quite a few banners by this point, but you know what? I love this guy, I'm pretty sure we all love this guy, so hey, he's back, and I'm sure we're all happy about that. Especially after we've gotten Lupa's banner, thus giving us triple fusion, and if not triple fusion, then at least DPS Brant becoming better. Because instead of pirate mains having to cope with using Sanhua as their second slot teammate, they can just use Lupa instead, and it's genuinely a lot better because of her outro skill. This character, in my opinion, has only really gotten better over time. In terms of his actual kit utility, he does a lot of things, but it doesn't feel like he does a lot of things and does them badly. No, I feel like he achieves everything his kit sets out to do quite well. His personal damage is quite frankly really solid with his Forte nuke. He's able to make Changli a lot easier to play, because you can opt to use his outro skill to justify using Changli as an on-fielder, because the damage is good enough to justify doing so. Not to mention how the guy heals, and can even provide you with a shield. And he's a really comfortable character to use against holograms, and also just generally feels really good to use in the overworld. Not to mention how he's just super duper fun. Because he builds so much energy recharge, you basically just always have his ultimate up, and even if you use his ult regularly in the overworld, it just comes back up again basically instantly. You're also able to play him independently of the other fusion characters, because his own outro is able to provide skill percent, making him a good choice for characters like Jinchi and Carlotta. You get the gist by this point. I'd say when it comes to his main flaws, firstly, he's not really the best quick swapper. You can definitely quick swap with him, that is a thing you can do, but the windows aren't really as clear as they are with Changli, and he's all around an inherently easier unit to play. Now for hyper casuals, that's going to be a selling point, but if you're somebody that's really big on quick swap, that might be a bit of a turnoff. However, you can in fact quick swap him with Changli. That is still a thing that you can do. It just might take some more getting used to. And then my personal nitpick, he gets interrupted really easily. And here's the thing, Kuro Games probably knows this, because whenever they made Lupa, They made sure that whenever she does some long interruptible ability, they would pause time so that she could cast the ability without getting interrupted. And god am I happy that they decided to do that. Because with Brant, it is infuriating whenever he either misses his anchor, or whenever his anchor gets interrupted, because so much of his damage is stored within that. And if you miss even 2 anchors, that's a reset. Plus, his damage ends up becoming really underwhelming if you don't have a signature weapon, because then it's really hard to build 5-piece tie-breaking courage. Yes, you can cope by running EOG on the classic fusion set, or even using an energy recharge weapon that's a 4-star, but the problem is that the passives of those weapons tends to be supportive, and his signature offers him a lot of nice offensive qualities. So I will say he definitely has one of the biggest sig drop-offs in the game because of his unique scaling on energy recharge. Outside of those flaws, he ends up being a really good, versatile character who's super duper strong, and he feels excellently self-sufficient in the overworld. Gonna be putting him into S tier for the value rankings of this patch. Triple Fusion is an incredibly strong team, while having the best alternate team options out of the whole bunch. Lupa's recent release was also wonderful for him, but I would like to emphasize, without a signature weapon, he'd be bumped down to A tier. Overall, there are lots of good banners here. I would say they're definitely more on the niche side, but it's all around going to be a really good patch if you're somebody that really likes the Havoc supports, and we're kind of bummed out that he didn't really have any major use case before this. I'm also glad that Kuro is keeping in trend of rerunning characters whenever they're relevant, since now your skip from before feels justified, since you can just pick them up now. How about yourself? Who are you going to be pulling for this time around? Let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a second channel in which I post whatever in regards to gacha games. Head on over and check that out if that's something that you're interested in. Hopefully this video is able to tell you who'd get you the best bang for your Astrites in Wuthering Waves version 2.5. This has been Juice, signing out. And the real option is to skip all of them to keep saving for Cho Yuen.